Video. Hello, everybody. I'm hoping you can all hear and see me. If you can't, and I'm just not hearing, somebody can pop into the chat and let me know. All right, my name is Annie Gibson, and I'm the publisher at Playwrights Canada Press. I'd like to welcome you all to our virtual reading tonight, and thank you for joining us. I'm so glad we can gather playwrights from across the country in the same space so we can introduce you to their new books. To describe myself, I'm a white woman with medium length, light brown hair who's on the young end of middle age. I'm wearing a blue t-shirt and little hoop earrings, and in the background you can see my kitchen, complete with my Pyrex collection. I'd first like to acknowledge that the playwrights, our hosts, and I are joining you from the traditional territories, some unceded, of many nations, including those of the Wendat people, the members of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Anishinaabe, including most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation in Treaty 13 territory, the Beothuk, Innu, and Inuit as well. We thank these peoples for their stewardship and their leadership, both past and present. Here in Toronto, or Takaranto, where I live, the place in the water where the trees are standing, I am a settler, but the Indigenous caretakers of this place, many years before, were a party to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which asks everyone to take only what they need, leaving some for everyone else. With this in mind, I've made a donation today to the Indian Residential Schools Survivors Society. With the recent visit of the Pope and what seemed to me like some pretty hollow words, I felt it important to continue to support survivors of the residential school system and indeed those who are affected by the continued colonization of this land. If you'd like to contribute as well, we'll post the link in the chat with more information. I am forever grateful for the opportunity to work, play, and share stories here on Turtle Island. We are also grateful for the funding we receive from the Canada Council for the Arts, the Ontario Arts Council, the Department of Canadian Heritage, and Ontario Creates. Without their contributions, we wouldn't be able to bring you all of these wonderful books and host events like this one. I'd like to add a special mention for my fellow staff members, Blake Sproul, Jessica Lewis, and Ave Kathy Swaran, and our board of directors. I'd be lost without this team of people working together. At this point, I'm sad to announce that Frances Concan isn't going to be able to join us tonight, but I hope you'll look up her incredible book, Women of the Fur Trade. It's funny and poignant in all the best ways. A few housekeeping notes for tonight. We've turned on the chat feature so you can send your praise to the playwrights. We encourage you to type in nice things about their reading. After each reading, we'll have time for a question or two. So if you have a burning question for any of our readers, now is your chance to ask. Either during the reading or shortly after, just type your questions into the chat and our host will read the questions aloud. So we'll all be able to hear them and give the writers a chance to respond. We've also created a document with the excerpt texts so you can follow along if you like. Jessica will post the link in the chat. We have closed captioning tonight, provided by National Captioning Canada. If you'd like to turn that feature on, simply click the close captioning button on the bottom of your Zoom screen. And don't forget to join us after the readings in the PCP Hub, our gather space. This is an online space where you will be represented by an 8-bit avatar. You'll be able to walk around the space using your keyboard, and you can explore new books in our library. You can wander around our virtual office, come see our poster of José Bautista. And when you bump into someone else in the space, your camera and microphone will turn on so you can have a conversation or interaction with them, just like in real life. And finally, I am pleased to announce that we've begun the summer sale on our website. If you'd like to buy copies of the plays you're going to hear from tonight or anything we're publishing in 2022, including forthcoming books, head on over to playwrightscanada.com for 25% off selected titles. Just enter the code NEWREADS at checkout. That's NEWREADS. And now I'd like to introduce you to our host for the evening, José Teodoro. José is a playwright, critic, and essayist. His plays include Cloudless, which last year was adapted into a serial audio drama presented by Canadian Stage. Along with composer Stephen Lyons, José is one half of Applied Science, whose current projects include the film Binary Star, written and directed by José, and a recording of Screen Door, José's performance text for actors and musicians, which will be released digitally digitally and on vinyl later this year, and which debuted live in Vancouver last December as part of Pi Theatre's Provocateur series. José's writing has appeared in publications such as Brick, Subterrane, The Fiddlehead, Film Comment, The Globe and Mail, and the Literary Review of Canada. José, take it away.
Thank you very much, Annie. It's an honor to be a host, particularly when I get to interact with so many my esteemed colleagues from across Turtle Island. A physical description of myself, well, I am a white fellow with blue eyes and a shaved head, and I'm wearing a pale green shirt with no collar. And behind me, really, there's mostly just like white walls, but you might spot some books and a little picture of Samuel Beckett over my shoulder. That's where he lives. So we have a bunch of amazing playwrights to talk with tonight. And the first one up is David James Brock. David James Brock is a playwright, poet, librettist, and screenwriter. He is a past winner of the Herman Wadden Canadian National Playwriting Competition, which he won for his play Wet. Brock is the author of 2 poetry collections, Everyone is CO2 and 10-Headed Alien. With Scottish Opera, Brock co-created Breath Cycle, a multimedia operatic song cycle developed with cystic fibrosis patients. And he co-wrote both the opera and the screenplay for Year of the Horse with Mike Heliachuk, and the script for the film Mother of All Shows with Melissa D'Agostino. He lives in Toronto. Hi, David.
Hi, Jose. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone at Young People's Theatre and everyone at Playwrights Canada Press who supported the existence of this book. Annie Gibson, Jessica Lewis, Bake Sproul. I see everyone saying hi. Hi, everybody. And David G, who designed the cover. I love the cover. It's great to see a cover and you like it. And thanks to the other readers. Congratulations on your beautiful plays and books. So to set up the play a little bit, I'm going to just read a little bit from my playwright's notes because I do feel like they sort of fit with what we're doing here tonight. And I'm grateful that there are people here. In A Million Billion Pieces, it's a play about Priya and Theo, both afflicted with the same lethal genetic disorder. They both grow up mired in precautions, believing they won't reach adulthood, that even being in a room with someone else who has the same disease will cause them to instantly explode into a million billion pieces. When I wrote this, I was not thinking about where we are today. And as far as I know, no such disease exists. But I think people of all ages can relate to feelings of fragility and isolation, as well as the intense desire to be around people who understand us. I wrote that in the playwright's note in 2019 at the premiere at Young People's Theatre. And then a few months after the play closed, the pandemic began and our long period of fragility and isolation began. We started to experience perhaps what a lot of people experience all the time. But some people had jokingly messaged me to say, you called this, and it's impossible not to think about the world then, the world now, and whether or not I'd even be able to write a play like this ever again, given our new reality. This play's meaning has changed, and I sometimes worry about whether or not an audience could bear to spend more time meditating on social, physical, and medical isolation. I'm sorry, Annie, if that goes against the sales of it. I hope you'll still buy the play, and I hope I get to see it again. In the scene I'm going to read, Eagle 19, aka Theo, is waiting for Priya Soprano, aka Priya, to return to the only relationship they're allowed to have, an online one. Again, for fear that if they're together, they'll cause each other to explode. That's what they've been told by parents, by doctors, and by their online community. And the last Eagle 19 has heard from Priya Soprano. She was going into the hospital, and he fears that he'll never see her again. And so that online fear begins to convince him that someday he'll have to see her in person. A little bit like Theo and his community, I'm going to attempt to use the chat. So if you see me chatting in the chat while reading, it's me attempting to be the online community as well as the reader. Eagle 19. Anyone out there tonight? Anyone out there in the big old universe? I was reading about the first dog sent into space. Her name was Laika. Here's a picture. This was in the 1950s in Russia. They found Laika on the streets of Moscow. 1950s Moscow seemed like a rough place to be for people and for dogs. Here, take a look at some of these. The Russians were in a race with the US to send a person to space, but they couldn't send a person at that point, too dangerous. So they sent Laika on November 3rd, 1957, up on a ship called Sputnik 2. The day before they sent Laika out into orbit, one of the Sputnik 2 scientists took her home so that Laika could play with his kids. He said, "I wanted to do something nice for her. She had so little time left to live." But he said it in Russian. "When I was born, doctors said I wouldn't live past my teens, that my life expectancy was 19. So Eagle 19, get it? No one thinks I'll survive the journey." And she died within a few hours. But the Russians learned a lot by sending up Laika, not how to bring her back alive or anything, but they learned something that would help keep humans safe, because in 1961, the Russians put a man up there, a man named Yuri Gagarin. I bet some of you thought he was an American or something. But Yuri Gagarin was in space for just under 2 hours and orbited Earth once. He came home unharmed, and he got his own Russian holiday and Russian statues and buildings with his name on them. 50 years later, they built a statue of Laika in Moscow. So that's pretty good. Picture Laika all alone on that spaceship, maybe knowing she was taking her last breath, thinking about how yesterday she was playing with those kids. It all makes me pretty sad. Saddest stories are always the ones that involve someone being alone, don't you think? Anyone ever feel like that? Priya Soprano, I need to know you're out there. Thank you. Million billion pieces.
Thank you very much for that lovely reading, David. It's having just spent time with the text, it's nice to hear it come off the page.
Thank you.
And so something, I mean, you already mentioned your forward to this printed edition of the play, and I would really encourage people to track it down just for that, because it gives a really interesting context to your experience of working on this and seeing it have resonance that you didn't expect, because you know some stuff has happened since the 2019 premiere of the show. I guess I'm curious, like you spoke a bit, and you write a little bit about the kind of conflicted feelings that you had thinking about your character's behavior and comparing it, of course, to a lot of the kind of culture war stuff that's transpired during the pandemic. But something I'm really curious about is, as you look forward to future productions of the show, I wonder if you think it will actually just land differently on your audience. Because if you're dealing with an audience of young people, I mean, you're going to have people for whom the pandemic was not some crazy thing that happened in the middle of their life, but a formative experience. Yeah. So the experience of these characters actually probably won't feel so remote. But I don't know how you're thinking about that at this point in time.
Yeah, no, I've come around. I mean, I remember I've come around a bit because I wrote the foreword. I mean, I guess maybe a year ago now, or a little under a year ago, when we were kind of coming out of things. But yeah, I hope that it has that resonance. I mean, there was a big part of what Gareth's the composer. If he's on, he's probably seething that I didn't mention him at the beginning. But a big part of this is an extension of the work we did with cystic fibrosis singers and opera singers who literally cannot be together for fear of passing super infections to each other. So we kind of already had the idea. It's born from that, even though it's not about that. It's sort of, again, it was really important for me to fictionalize this disease and this condition to make it much more the sci-fi fantasy world, opera world that these characters sort of inhabit. So look, it's there's not much I can do about it, to answer your question. And I think probably now I've come around to the fact that maybe it'll be a nice meditation on it, and maybe people relate a bit more. But I also know that there's probably an exhaustion. And I remember seeing a very early tweet, which I disagreed with completely, saying, playwrights, please do not write about the pandemic. And now I find it absolutely impossible that we would not write about the time we live in. So maybe it applies. Maybe it's particularly because it's a play for young audiences, maybe it brings up some conversations in the classroom. That would be nice.
Yeah, I feel like it will just resonate in a completely different way that won't feel depressing. It will just feel like an acknowledgement of the lived experience. But I'm glad you mentioned Gareth, your composer, and singing in general, because something I've been thinking about is that I'm just very interested in the question of how the very particular form of A Million Billion Pieces affects the narrative. You know, if by kind of combining elements of more or less traditional theater with opera, if you found that things were created in the narrative that could only have happened because of that container. And I'm thinking specifically actually about singing, you know, because singing is like, I think most of us feel that when we are singing, we're sort of inhabiting our body in a way that we don't when we're just speaking. We're very aware of our bodies. And this play is, of course, so much about negotiating with the limits of our bodies. Yeah. So I don't know if you can speak a little bit about how I know, I mean, you've been invested in working with music for a long time, but I don't know if you can speak a bit about how the musical element of the show helped you maybe forge the narrative or details within the narrative.
Yeah, well, for one of the for Priya Soprano, she appears online as the world's most powerful opera singer, right? So that's her online persona, and this kind of it's a four actors, but two. There's the characters as their real selves, and then there's the character as their online selves. And most of the play actually happens with the real characters getting together. But it was important to me that the characters, particularly Priya Soprano, because she doesn't have power, she imagines the most powerful thing she could be, which would be this incredible opera singer that she once saw when she was younger. And she's always felt a lack of power, and that manifestation of singing as power is something that Gareth and I really work on quite a bit. Gareth said something very beautiful once to me when we were working with, I think it was just on our first opera. He said, singing is beautiful breath. And I never forgot that, right? And I love that idea that singing is beautiful breath. And that has really changed, particularly when we work with people whose breath isn't as powerful. And so that really did affect one character completely, Priya Soprano. So narratively, it's everything to her. And I thought instead of having her just do the monologue about how much opera means to her, there's a scene that we literally go to the opera and we have her performing the piece. And we had a really great singer in the premiere, at least, named Yonel Sills, who performed that piece. And so, yeah, music a little bit, not like a traditional opera music. The music actually, it's not just coming out of nowhere, it matters to the character. So hopefully that answers that question.
It does very much, yeah. And I'm just seeing now too that we have some questions from our audience. Some of them I think you've answered, but there is one in particular about you know, for those of us who haven't seen the show, about how this is being staged, how it's being realized with the chat function and all of that. I don't know if you can just help describe a bit to us how it works in production.
I mean, for the premiere, I leave it really open because I think I know that as technology changes, a lot of us who put technology in our plays date our plays really quickly, right? So I left it really, really open to use the technology of the day, particularly with young audiences, right? If we're showing, like, even if this was Facebook, even 3 years ago, I think young audiences would be like, no, we don't do that. So I really do leave it open. For the premiere, the text was spoken. So every time Priya Soprano or Eagle 19 are speaking, it's a suggestion that it's online. So there wasn't projections of the text in the script, and I liked that because I thought it allowed the actors to carry it. But again, that's why most of the play is actually offline, and it kind of alternates. It's braided, right? We go from online to offline, alternating throughout the whole script. So the chat function, if a production wanted to project all the text, the actors still would have to say it. They could do that, but for the most part, there's a suggestion that every time Priya Soprano or Eagle 19 speak, it's through a screen, either typed or a Zoom chat. I didn't even hear a Zoom 3 years ago when I wrote it, so I'm not sure if Zoom appeared was on there, but certainly something like Skype was in my head.
Yeah, yeah. I guess it feels like video calls were invented 2.5 years ago, but yeah, they were around before. Thank you so much for all that, David. I think we should be moving along, but not until we have our trivia question. So I'm going to ask a question based on the reading that you just heard and that you were paying very close attention to and hopefully also taking notes on. And whoever answers it, let me make sure I have the chat open. Whoever answers it first will win a copy of this lovely play with this beautiful cover by David G. All right, so I'm set up here. The question is, what was the name of the space vessel that the Russians sent Laika the dog up on? And Chantel had the correct answer, Sputnik. Sputnik 2 if you want to get really picky about it, but I think Sputnik is just fine. Chantel, you are the winner of a copy of this handsome book with beautiful contents. All right, so I believe Jessica is going to get your information to make sure that you get that book. And we are going to move along to talk about the publication of this lovely book, Every Day She Rose. So I would like to introduce Andrea Scott and Nick Green, who are on their way here together in one frame.
Together.
I'm delighted that I get to look at both of you in one rectangle.
The same.
Andrea Scott's play Eating Pomegranates Naked won the RBC Arts Professional Award and was named Outstanding Production at the 2013 SummerWorks Festival. Better Angels, a Parable, won the SummerWorks Award for Outstanding Production. Both were published by Sirocco Drama in 2018. Her play about Viola Desmond, Controlled Damage, had its sold-out world premiere at Neptune Theatre in 2020 and will open at the Grand Theatre in this year, 2022. Her dark comedy, Bad Habits, landed her a job at the All Black Writers Room of the Porter, which she followed with by snagging a spot pitching to Netflix with her supernatural drama, Cassidy Must Die. 2021 saw her winning the $10,000 from Amazon and the Indigenous Screen Office, pitching her coming-of-age dramedy, Done. She's currently working in the writer's room on the 15th season of Murdoch Mysteries, while co-writing a 1-hour drama for Sienna Films. And Andrea lives in Toronto, maybe even in that room. No, I think that's actually Nick's room. Nick's bio is suspiciously brief.
Wait, I just want to say, I have to follow that. Like, come on. I'm just gonna leave.
You can fill it in, man. I'm just gonna read.
There's no $10,000 from that. No, just spoiler alert.
Nick Green is a Dora and Sterling Award-winning playwright and the creator of the Social Distancing Festival. His credits include Happy Birthday, Baby, Every Day She Rose, of course, Fangirl in Real Life, Dinner with the Duchess, Body Politic, Poof, the musical, and the fabulous Buddha Boy. And Nick also lives in Toronto, currently on the same sofa as Andrea. So if you want to say more about yourself, you're more than welcome, but that's all that I got.
I also have 2 dogs that are currently in the bedroom upstairs, and you might hear them barking through the course of this. Yeah, but no other awards that you didn't mention. I'll leave those for Andrea.
Okay, that's very kind of you. Well, I will let you guys offer us a reading, and if you want to set it up beforehand, that's up to you, or go in cold. Either way, take it away.
Thank you. We'll definitely set that up. Do you want to get us started?
So this is the Every Day She Rose excerpt. And at this point, the Nick character, because I don't know how much you know about the play, but it's about Kathy Ann and Mark, who are best friends. Mark is a gay white man who lives in the village, who shares an apartment with his best friend, Kathy Ann, a Black straight woman. They go to the Pride Parade. It's the year that Black Lives Matter stopped the parade, and there is conflict. But then we find out, I think 5 or 10 pages in, that this is actually, they are a confection created by Nick and Andrea. And then we get to see them creating this play. And what we're about to see is right after Nick has like all these Post-its explaining what makes the play work, and anything that doesn't work, he keeps removing the Post-its. And it just so happens that those Post-its are the ones that I had suggested. So now we are going to start right after that.
It's a meta journey, and we are very excited to present it to all of you, and very excited that you all came. Thank you for coming so much, and thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So, do you see what I did there?
The glass menagerie.
What? No, we have been given circumstances, inciting incident, rising action with obstacles, climax, then falling action, and resolution.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think so.
because it looks like a linear play, almost in real time, set in a white guy's living room.
No, there's the scene at the parade.
Right.
You don't like it.
No, it's just that I've seen it over and over a million times.
I'm not, just because it's in a living room.
Maybe we should take a break.
Yeah.
Why are you writing this play?
Well, I think it's an important moment that we should be.
Yes. I read your section of the grant proposal, but actually, why are you writing it?
Well, we are writing it.
Well, sure. But it was your idea first. I mean, you came to me with it.
Well, besides the fact that I think you're brilliant and I want to work with you.
Well, yes, that's obvious. Who wouldn't want to work with me? But actually,
Well, I think I was thinking that this is something new, something Toronto, something very us.
Yes. No, that's not what I'm asking. I know the political intentions.
Well, I'm not sure what you're asking.
What are you, Nick, wanting to say about yourself as an artist by writing this play?
I'm hoping that you and I together can tackle some issues in coalition. It's about coalition, the possibilities of using art.
That's the grant proposal. I'm asking you.
Okay, well, it feels like you're implying that I have ulterior motives.
Which are?
I don't have ulterior motives.
I'm not saying that you do.
So why are you writing this play?
I guess I want to see what happens.
Oh, how noble.
What does that mean?
Nothing. That is why I am writing it too. To see what happens.
Okay.
Okay. Do we need to talk about something?
You keep backing away from the real question.
I think I face them right on. In fact, I think that you come out a lot better in this than I do.
You mean Kathy Ann comes out a lot better?
Yes.
Exactly.
Exactly what?
That Mark's not you.
And?
So you're not so awful like other gay white guys out there.
There it is.
What?
My ulterior motives that you think that I have.
Well, have you ever thought maybe that's why you wanted to write this? Jesus. You're able to write about an incident that is about racism, but you can come off without any blood on your hands.
That was not my intention, Andrea.
We're in a time where racialized stories are being prioritized, and you're able to be part of that conversation by condemning your own community, and you can get that grant money and still be white.
Believe it or not, I didn't propose this idea for the whopping $1,000 in grant money. I think that this could be an important piece of theater if we write it together.
But why do you think that it has to be told together?
Because it was my idea.
So then why wouldn't you write it yourself?
you know the answer to that question.
Why can't you say it?
Because that wasn't my motive when I asked you.
So then why did you ask me, Nick?
Honestly, right now, I have no idea.
That's what I thought.
I didn't mean that.
I know you didn't. But I hope you keep thinking about it.
The end. Come back.
I'm back. Thank you, guys. I feel like you've done this before.
You know, when we were developing this at Nightwood, we were just like a bit of a traveling roadshow of doing reading excerpts, and we kind of love it.
Yes,
so we're cool with it.
We're both former actors, and we know what we're doing.
Former actor. I don't like the former part of that sentence, but we can table that part. I mean, I'm so glad that you read that excerpt in particular, because I feel like both between the interaction between Kathy and Mark, and between the interactions between Andrea and Nick, I feel like they're placing something that is super important, especially in this particular moment, which is that it seems to be thinking about intersectionality as like a living concept, as something that needs ongoing negotiation. It's not like something that you can just sign up for and you instantly become politically correct and everything's good. Like, it's something that needs to be wrestled with. I don't know, though, whether or not that's sort of what was on your mind when you guys started this.
Andrea's looking at me because I did actually take her out for dinner and pitch the idea to her. I think there were a lot of things on my mind and our mind once we were working together on it. I have a social work background as well. And part of my studies in social work focused on the ways that gay men access and exercise power over women, and how, in effect, it becomes an expression of masculinity in its mechanism to dominate women. And so when you add race to that conversation, it becomes a really difficult and complicated conversation, because you also look at the ways that gay men appropriate parts of Black culture and Black female culture, and they, I think, find empowerment in doing so, but as a result, they're kind of stripping power away from and dominating. So it was something I was really interested in, while at the same time also doing a practicum in social work, where I saw myself as a gay person being escalated up the ladder there without really having to try that hard. So it was a lot of things on my mind when I brought it to Andrea. I don't know if you want to talk about why you were interested in.
I had never written a play with anybody before, and I thought the concept was really, really interesting. I hadn't actually been to the parade that year in 2016, and so I remember the day. I remember all the news stories, but they were inconsistent, and nobody really knew why it had happened. And I thought, what an interesting concept, because you said that you had been to some parties afterwards and had heard some people saying things that made you go,
ugly.
This is
during it.
Yeah. So I was like, I would love to investigate that. And that's how this partnership happened.
And I'm curious if you guys were surprised what came out of it, once you were both hooked on the idea. Did you find yourself exploring things that you actually didn't think you would be doing as a playwright?
Well, it didn't start off the way that it has turned out. It wasn't always meta-theatrical. Initially, it was just about the relationship between Kathy Ann and Mark and the dissolution of that friendship. And then several months went by when Nick was like, I have an idea. And it was after we had read at the Pride.
Right, at the Pride event.
The Pride event in June of 2017.
Yeah.
And that's when you were like, I have an idea. This is a different approach to it, but what if we start to focus on the two of us writing this play together? And I was like, well, that's interesting.
And then we were in the Nightwood Theatre lab. They accepted us in their playwriting unit.
Right from the hip.
Right from the hip, thank you. And Andrea Donaldson and was it just Andrea at the time? Yeah, she
Yeah.
really challenged us to write scenes that scare us.
Yeah.
And that was like a really important invitation ultimately for us to just kind of get down and dirty with it. And it was really hard.
Yes, it was very challenging.
It was really hard.
Mhm.
Yeah. Google Docs helped a lot.
Did it though?
No, it made it worse. It made everything worse.
How did Google Docs help you? You mean because then you didn't have to work face to face? You were just working on Docs at the moment?
Andrea's the busiest playwright. You remember her bio. She's the busiest playwright in Canada and TV writer. Like, to be in the same city as her, I had to book her 6 months in advance, which I was really thrilled for her. But we would do a lot like email and Google Docs, and then grab each other in person in my awful condo boardroom at the time and do what writing we could. But actually it made things worse. We should have sat in the same room more often working on this play. But hindsight's 2020. Maybe the sequel.
Yeah. Kathy Ann and Mark 20 years later.
Every day she fell.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Well, that's actually, I mean, that's exactly the other thing I'd really like to ask you guys is that, I won't spoil how the play ends for those who don't know, but things already begin to change in their lives. I'll just say that. But really, since the events being discussed in the play, the world has changed more and more and more. And given all that, I'm just wondering where you think Kathy Ann and Mark would be today, what they'd be doing now, what their politics would be like today, if you can imagine that.
That is a good question.
I don't, though. I mean, the way that the play is written, they're not friends today. I sadly don't think that the issues we're tackling in this play have gotten any
Better,
more enlightened or better. If not, I'd say probably more polarized and maybe worse.
But I mean, I would love to see what happens to Kathy Ann and Mark when they're in their 40s. Like, who are they then? I mean, there is a conversation that's like, where do you see yourself in whatever amount of years? And it just gets mean.
It gets
really mean. But I mean, when you're in your 40s and you've got your kids, and you know your character may have also maybe moved to a smaller place in a different town and also kind of settle down a bit. I mean, that would be an interesting story.
The guy we wrote, the characters that Andrea and Nick in the play write, Mark and Kathy Ann, I think they're extensions of their anxieties about how they'll come off as playwrights. And so the character of Nick in the play really wants to make sure Mark is just the worst, so that he can look great. And the character of Mark, I think that the Nick in the play is written as probably an anti-vaxxer. And he's probably not any better.
Oh dear.
But anyway, who knows? Good question though. Interesting.
Because there was no George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. That had not happened yet.
Oh my God, that's right.
Yeah, so it's almost like we were a little flakish.
Someone give us $1,000 and we'll write it.
Well, I commend a bigger fee.
Now, I want to plug something before you. I want to plug something before you move on to our trivia. It's just this play is running in Stratford, opening this week. So if folks are near Stratford, it's through Here for Now. And it has I think it's like a 10-day run. So head to the website if you're in the area. I'm going to go see it on Sunday.
I'm going to see it on Friday.
Congratulations, guys. That's super exciting. And I also just want you to know, in case you missed it, that there was a comment in the chat saying that you guys make a really great comic duo. So if you retire Kathy Ann and Mark, I think you definitely, if you can do it, you have a future together. Perhaps just as Nick and Andrea.
We'll consider it. Thank you so much.
Doing this. But yes, indeed, it is trivia time. So once again, with my very limited technical skills, I'm going to try to ask this question, watch the chat, and give someone a copy of this beautiful play. So the question is, wait one second. The question is, okay. Which early in the reading, you heard Andrea compare what they were writing to a play they were writing. What was the play? Oh, all right, Elizabeth. Boom. Boom.
Okay, Elizabeth, you quick.
The glass menagerie is in fact the correct answer. Boom. Boom, says Elizabeth. Thank you. You are the winner, Elizabeth. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for being in the same screen. It wouldn't have been the same if you were on different screens. So
No, this is great.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
And so now we will move on to the play whose title I've been wanting to say all evening, which is Everybody Just Calm the Fuck Down by Robert Chafe. Is Robert coming? Is Robert here? I can't see his face yet. Maybe I'll just start talking about him. Hi, Robert.
I'm here. Hi.
So who are you, Robert? Robert Chafe is a writer, educator, actor, and arts administrator based in St. John's, Ukdamcook, otherwise known as Newfoundland. He has worked in theater, dance, opera, radio, fiction, and film. His stage plays have been seen in Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, and in the United States. And they include Oil and Water, Tempting Providence, After Image, Under Wraps, Between Breaths, and The Colony of Unrequited Dreams, which was, of course, an adaptation of the novel by Wayne Johnson. Robert has been shortlisted twice for the Governor General's Literary Award for Drama, and he won the award for After Image in 2010. He has been a guest instructor at Memorial University, Sir Wilfrid Grenfell College, and at the National Theatre School of Canada. And in 2018, he was awarded an honorary doctorate from Memorial University, and he is the playwright and artistic director of Artistic Fraud. So, welcome, Robert. Do you want to do any talking before you read, or?
Sure, I'll do a very one sentence brief introduction of this play and say that most of the plays that I've written in my life have come about because I see something shiny and intriguing and interesting, and I start running towards it and trying to get closer to it and trying to understand it. And this play, I've been thinking a lot about it in the last year since we did it. This play was like something that was in front of me and I couldn't see around. And I wanted to expunge, which was a very different way to write for me. So it felt not necessarily something I wanted to write, but I had to write. That sounds really pretentious, but it's true. And I think it's interesting to say, because it's true. So this is a play called Everybody Just Calm the Fuck Down. My mother thought I should call it Everybody Just Shut the Fuck Up, but I don't think that's as good a title. She insists that it is. So I'll just dive into a monologue in this play, and it's a one-person play, and you'll probably get an idea fairly early on what this play deals with. I'm gonna turn off my fan. I meant to do this earlier. I don't know if you could hear that. I'm probably a lot easier to hear now. Sorry. It's warm in St. John's. I can't even believe I'm saying that. It's true. It's warm. It's never warm here. Everybody just calm the fuck down. I wake up with shooting pains in my head. They're sharp, and they run from my eyes to the back of my scalp, not connected to my heartbeat, isolated and random. And with every one, I can feel my sense of balance shift and wobble. Like if I was standing up, I'd totally be falling down. I think I might be having a stroke, but then I think, no, this has happened before, and you've gone to the hospital, and there was nothing wrong. And then I think, well, maybe they missed something. And then I think, they gave you a fucking CAT scan, Robert. Chill out and go back to sleep. And I try, but I can't. I want to know what time it is, and I want to check, but my cell phone is plugged in on the other side of the room, and then I think I really should remember to get an extension cord that reaches behind the bed so I can plug my phone in a little closer to me, or plug in my laptop in case I wake up with a good idea instead of waking up with shooting pains. And then I'm thinking about my computer and how much I have on it, and the last time that I might have backed it up, and that I really should back it up, and that I really should have brought it upstairs with me, because what if there was a break-in and someone took it? I mean, my life is on that computer, unfinished work, stuff that I'm excited about, proud of, stuff that I'm not so proud of, stuff that's private, very, very private. And then I'm more worried about someone accessing my computer than I am about them stealing it. And then I remember that it has a security lock. And then I'm thinking about screensavers and how they've evolved, and how they used to be all abstract and trippy, and now how all screensavers are nature pictures and polar bears and penguins getting ready to jump and leopards in tall grass and lush green valleys, and how it's all a lie. And screensavers really should be pictures of factories in China and landfills filled with plastic wrap and scrap electronics. And then I'm thinking that screensavers are just like everything else that we surround ourselves with. They're just a desperate attempt to forget what we are and what we have done to this world. And art is like that too. And TV, theater for sure. I've made theater like that. And I'm thinking about that, and TV. Bad TV, sports, professional sports. And then I'm thinking about professional sports and how it's really only a sanitized way of feeding our deep-seated need to be combative and pack-driven without actually shedding blood. And then I'm thinking, no, not all sports, surely. Maybe just team sports, because stuff like synchro or the hammer throw doesn't really hold the same thrill. So obviously people watch those for pure reasons, an appreciation of the skill and athleticism. And then I'm thinking, no, fuck that. No, people don't watch those at all unless there is a flag on the person's shoulders and a medal count. So it's all the same thing then, right? And then I'm thinking about Chomsky's comments about professional sports being a grand distraction, purposefully endorsed, if not staged, by the powers to be to keep us occupied while really consequential and truly catastrophic shit goes down. And then I'm thinking that I really should learn that quote so I could whip it out at parties and in arguments. And then I think that I should look it up, and that I really should have brought my computer upstairs. And then I think I hear a noise downstairs. So I stop breathing so I can listen. And I listen. And I listen. And then I'm thinking about how loud or quiet an intruder could, would, should be for me to be able to hear them all the way up here in my bedroom. And then I have to breathe again. Like I have to breathe again. And so I do my best to convince myself that it was nothing. It was really nothing. It was probably nothing. Just the house settling. Even though it's really old and should have settled by now. And then I'm thinking that safety and serenity are like a rickety house, a house too old, overstressed, dangerous possibility of collapse when the wind blows hard or when it rains heavy. But most days I can manage to stand. I can keep it together just fine. This rickety old house of peace and calm, I can keep it standing just fine as long as I breathe. And so I do. I breathe. And as I lie there breathing, 5, 4, 3, 2, and out through the nose. And as I lie there breathing, this house of sanity is standing just fine. Just fine. Just fine. And then I think I smell smoke. And I'll stop there.
Thank you very much for that reading, Robert. I'm at least 34% more anxious after hearing it than I was. No, I think it's a great introduction to the psychic space that this play places us in. Are you at all offended by the term autofiction? Can we talk about this as autofiction?
Sure. No, I'm not offended by much. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. No, I mean, I'm just thinking that there's this kind of question that hovers around it that really interests me, which is that, we have this character, this Robert, who, has the same biographical sketch as you, mostly has the same experiences as you, although the Robert in the play also even corrects that at some point in time in the play. Yeah. But as you explored the key questions, part of which is like a kind of medical mystery, right? As you explored these questions and tried to funnel them through this Robert, right? Through the Robert in the play. Did you surprise yourself? I mean, did you find things you didn't think you wanted to say, or did you learn things that you didn't know about the experiences that you're grappling with?
Uh, yeah, I mean, yeah, and I'm still learning things from this experience. I mean, it's very interesting because another thing that separates this play from a lot of the other work that I've done is that I generally start, and I know this is not the case for a lot of writers, but it is for me. Like I generally start writing, and I know what the play is about, and I know what the point, like I know what the end is, for a better way of putting it. I know what the end is. I know what the thesis of the show is, like what I want to pick at. And that gets refined and changed through the course of writing something. But this one, I mean, really right up until production draft, we were in rehearsal, I still didn't know. It doesn't have a resolution. I mean, the play is rooted in to state briefly, the play is rooted in a set of kind of medical symptoms I've been having for the last 8 years that kind of came with a sudden onset when I was in Regina one night. And and coming along with that, it came side by side with some anxiety, and so it's a chicken and the egg thing: are the symptoms anxiety, or is the anxiety a result of the symptoms? And so that's all I knew that I was unpacking and writing about. And because there still hasn't been an answer to those medical symptoms, I didn't know what the play was about. I didn't know how it was going to end. And so it was really working closely with Sarah Garton Stanley, who is my dramaturg and director on this piece, to kind of embrace the notion of exploring an uncertainty and try to, because it's a play and there was also a sense of responsibility. Like I didn't, many times when I was writing the play, if I was being truthful, it would not have had a happy ending. I was not in a good place. And so as a writer and a creator, I knew that I had a responsibility to my audience, not necessarily to get them to buy a ticket and come to my play and leave them, deposit what I was feeling with them without any kind of lift or out or way of looking at it that is outside of it somehow. And so we were looking, and so Sarah had this whole thing about that she was really pushing dramaturgically this notion of embracing uncertainty and coming to peace with uncertainty. And so I felt like, as I was trying to make that work dramaturgically in the play, I was trying to make that work in my life. And so it was a very interesting, and it was a really interesting moment when we kind of hit upon, when I one day just confessed, well, all of this everything in this show is true except for these three things. And Sarah was like, well, you should tell us that. You should just tell us what's not true. And I was like, right. And then it'll all be true, right? Okay, yeah. So like, it really is, painfully vulnerable. I have what a friend of mine calls a vulnerability hangover after performing this one, like that kind of deep embarrassment. I kind of just want to crawl into myself, like, why are you doing this? Like, why are you telling people this stuff? But it's it's essential on some level, I guess, to do it. So I don't know if I answered your question. I just rambled. Sorry about that, Jose.
No, that is super fascinating to me, and I think it's interesting because you mentioned this moment where Robert lists the three things that aren't true, but of course it's Robert in the play telling us that, so I didn't actually totally believe him.
Right.
That may or may not be true, but I think about something actually that Nick said earlier, half jokingly, half not. I think that also when you're writing a version of yourself, you might also in some ways try to make that version of yourself seem, for lack of just for a general term, worse than you really are, or more horrible than you really are, or more something than you really are. Did you find yourself exaggerating aspects of yourself to bring this character to life on his own?
I think there's a section in the middle of the play that the play is kind of divided into three sections. The first section is almost like a TED talk where I talk about the experience of the symptoms, and then it moves into kind of a more kind of a theatrical, highly stylized kind of dip into anxious thinking, anxiety thinking. And in that realm, I found myself going to like really interesting places of tiny little things that have happened to me and little things that I think about that are rooted in anxiety, but they got blown up theatrically. They got quite blown up and exaggerated. Because I think that's what anxiety is, little tiny things that, I'd come home an hour later, like after I'll get off this call and I'll go, I shouldn't have said that. All that stuff. But I mean, it really, I have to say it's pretty grounded in truth.
Mm.
It really, really is. There's, like I said, we did have that moment where I kind of had this thing where I said, it feels so weird that most of the play is really, really true, except for, and then Sarah's solution was, well, just tell us those things aren't true, and fess up. So that's what yeah. So it really is. It really is rooted. I'm not quite sure. Like I say, that vulnerability hangover and the kind of second guessing myself on that really happened in production. It didn't happen in the writing. I'm not quite sure the separation between the actor Robert and the writer Robert. I don't think the actor Robert wanted the writer Robert to do what he did, but the writer Robert kind of has no censor in that regard. So it really is, yeah, it really is quite true version of
Well,
me.
I mean, just thinking about all the anxiety and uncertainty that you were confronting in writing this, I wonder if you developed new tools for that over the process, and if you can, because I mean, I'm sure there are people who are going to see the play, read the play, who had just heard what you were reading and will really identify with some of the anxiogenic elements in it. But I wonder if you developed like new tools or ways for coping with anxiety.
Well, I think, I mean, I think everyone's journey is different, right? But I mean, I do remember, and this was a part of the show at one point, that a friend of mine had told me that he had seen. He was in the UK, and he had seen a therapist about. I have no. Do not quote me on this. I'm not a therapist. I'm not telling you this is the actual way to go. But he had seen a therapist for some anxiety he was having about flying, and in part of his work on this, the therapist had said to him, "You have to embrace every time you get on that plane that it could in fact go down, and you have absolutely zero control over it." And though, like, that's terrifying, of course, but there's something about there was a real I really identified with this notion of relinquishing control, and I immediately feel my tension drain from my body when I just lean into, like, right, we're in the middle of producing a play right now, a rather large play in St. John's, in the middle of a massive wave of COVID right here. I live in constant fear that we're going to get shut down before this beautiful thing hits the stage in 3 weeks. And then someone will look at me and go, "You cannot control COVID." And I'm like, right, I actually, and then everything just seeps out of me and I relax. So relinquishing control is something I've really tried to lean into and embrace in my life. I make that sound so easy, don't I?
I don't buy that easy at all.
It's really not.
I think that's great advice, and it's the kind of great advice that you have to kind of arrive at. I think probably
yes. Find for yourself.
Getting through a whole bunch of other tools and techniques. Yeah. I'm really curious. Finally, I'd just like to know if you think at this point. I mean, I love the fact. Maybe not for you, but for me, as your audience member, I love the fact that you still feel that you're essentially dealing with something unresolved here, unresolved even for you as a playwright. And I wonder if moving forward, if you think that you will. That this character, this Robert, will return in future work?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. It's really interesting. I mean, I won't go too far down this rabbit hole because I could talk about it for hours. But an aspect, we just prepped this for publication in the last couple of months. There's a section in the show, this is kind of related to your question and kind of not, but there's a section in the show where I talk about a true thing that happened to me, where one of my diagnostic things I did was the CAT scan, because I was having these very severe head pains, and then they told me they couldn't find anything on the CAT scan, and I actually cried. But not out of relief. I was so frustrated that I was having pain and that it was not showing up. I cried because my CAT scan was clear, which is very and then kind of walked away from that and went, that's messed up. And so I talk about that a little bit in the show, and we produced the show last August. And then in January, out of the blue, my older brother was diagnosed with a brain tumor with very little warning, and he passed away about a month and a half later. And so when going back and doing this play about uncertainty and unknowing, the whole thing just shifted. And we didn't, I wanted the text in the play, the spoken text in the play, to be true to what we actually was said on stage and what the production is on stage. So myself and Sarah dug into the stage directions to kind of lean into this idea of the Robert of last summer truly not having an idea of what was around the turn. and that we truly do live in this this bizarre state of worry and anxiety of what's to come with absolutely no way of knowing. I don't know if that answers your question so much to say that, you know, I've been thinking a lot about my brother, and I've been thinking a lot about his relationship to this play, and I've been thinking a lot about what it means to live. And in many ways, the play is about this, with a couple of other deaths of close friends, what it means to live in the wake of somebody else who actually did die from something that you're afraid that you have. And so I think there's more stuff to be unpacked there. I certainly, if I get a diagnosis, I mean, you know, I guess I'll have to write a play about that. Everybody has calmed the fuck down. Everybody liven the fuck up. I don't know what I'd call it anywhere.
Well, I want to say I'm very sorry for your loss, Robert.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks.
But yes, I hope that whatever creative work happens in response to that feeds you in the process of dealing with it and living and moving on. Yeah.
Thanks. That's what it's all about. Moving on.
Yeah. Well, speaking of moving on, it's time for trivia.
Yay, trivia.
How's that for a segue? So yes, it is our final trivia question based on the reading that you just heard from Robert. So I'm gonna make sure I can see the chat here, and the chat is visible. Yes, you also have some words of sympathy here in the chat. So the trivia question, which someone will answer very quickly because it's such a good question and everyone was paying attention. Robert referenced a quote from someone about professional sports. Who was this someone? Oh, Abigail. Abigail was the first to come up with Noam Chomsky. Abigail, you are the winner. Oh, I haven't even showed this lovely book yet. You are a winner of this handsome volume of Everybody Just Calm the Fuck Down. So congratulations, Abigail. And thank you so much, Robert. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, David, for throwing yourselves into conversations with me. Thank you very much to BCP for allowing me to host. And I guess at this point, I will just pass it along to Jessica.
Hello, and thank you so much to everyone. I'm just gonna stop your stuff here for a second. Thanks so much to everyone who has been a part of this tonight. This has been wonderful, and yes, we're sorry Frances couldn't make it. We hope you still enjoy her book, though. It's great.